What comes to mind when I say Watch Dogs? Is it disappointment, deceit, mediocrity? For a few of you, it's something positive, but that few is a growing minority. And why is that? Simply put, the years have been kind to Watch Dogs, and each year separates us from the E3 demo of 2012 that promoted a game still yet to release. Sure, the idea for Watch Dogs is there, but any comparison to the demo makes it clear that this was not running on current console hardware, and if that wasn't clear, here's the proof. Jonathan Morin, creative director of Watch Dogs, made it clear that the game was not ready to be shown, and was being developed for next-gen consoles that weren't even known at the time. The team didn't know what to expect, or what would be possible on the hardware, but Yves Guillemot insisted that the game be presented, knowing full well there was a high probability that promises would not be kept. We can add that to the list of crimes alongside promoting a toxic work environment and being a French Canadian, but it takes two to tango. When met with limitless presentation, why wouldn't we think that limitless gameplay potential was to follow? Even in those early showcases, Watch Dogs laid its gameplay bare, but it didn't stop the allure of a new intellectual property and the endless possibilities that come with such a new frontier. A world where everything is connected, and becoming less and less fictional has the potential to say a lot. What are the ethics of the government, or anyone for that matter, knowing everything about you? What are the social implications, political implications, criminal implications? Watch Dogs only answers a few of these, and often with little depth. The concept is fresh, but it is supplemented by ideas that could fit anywhere. This is a theme present across all of Watch Dogs. The idea that the game does not need to have hacking. In fact, many of its best qualities ignore the hacking entirely. Its gameplay is at its best with one hand clutching a grenade and the other gripping iron. The story's greatest qualities are the mystery that unfolds. Aiden's response to his trauma and its setting is unique because of its gloomy atmosphere, coat physics included. The hacking is unique, but stays an arm's length away from everything else, and the moments it does intersect are fleeting. If your game that is entirely marketed on a hacking mechanic is still good without it, there may be a problem, or an excellent foundation. Regardless, the qualities here were overpowered by the taste left in players' mouths leading up to the game's release. With such a taste, the internet spit a toxic narrative that Watch Dogs lied to the player about much more than its presentation. What resulted was a rude awakening regarding both the game and the effects of hype culture. This is what warrants a retrospective evaluation. We've had plenty of reviews that focus on what the game was supposed to be or what we were told it was going to be, but the discussion of what the game is and what its qualities are disconnected from the could, would, and potentially should is few. Because unfortunately for Watch Dogs, it fell victim to the very dystopia it painted. A world without privacy and where there's limitless information at the tip of your fingers, but that comes with limitless misinformation too. Statements without context, false narratives. Nowadays, finding the truth is not as simple as using Google, and the best way to know the quality of something is to experience it yourself, or at least play it vicariously through an excessive critique of the game. Watch Dogs stars Aiden Pierce as he begins unraveling the web of criminals, hackers, and fixers responsible for his assassination, which in its failure took his niece's life. Over the next year, Aiden goes AWOL, taking a Waynian response to grief, becoming a creature of the night, preying on criminals, but his superpower is not money or supernatural abilities, it's the city. Through the use of some clever hacking, Aiden has the ability to control multiple parts of Chicago, ranging from the L trains to the Transformers. Security cameras become your eyes, steam pipes your weapons, and cutting comms and sightlines allows Aiden to isolate his targets. Aiden's morals are, like his hacking hat, gray, and while his sense of justice is defined, the goal is simply avenging his niece. But in his pursuits, ghosts from his past come knocking at his sister's door, kidnapping her, lighting a fire under Aiden to not only save his sister, but find out who is conducting the symphony of grief, trauma, and mystery that screens his life like heavy rain. So let's not delay any further and enter a world where knowledge truly is power, where someone's dirty secrets are more threatening than a firearm, and one that carries a definitive theme that at every turn is at odds with the player. Welcome to Watch Dogs, and spoilers ahead. While the fidelity of Watch Dogs will age with time, I believe its atmosphere is evergreen. The windy city is seen in every leaf violently whipping in the wind, and the admittedly janky coat physics accompanying Aiden's every move. It seems to be one of the many issues with the PC port of this game, which while offering the closest we will ever get to that golden E3 demo, is still not ideal. There are bugs throughout this game, and the one you'll see at all times is Aiden's coat flapping viscerally even in the most minor breeze. I don't mean to harp on this too much, but I need to mention this issue because most of the footage doesn't show it. I will almost always stick with a vanilla game for videos as I want to provide an accurate look at what the game game will be upon purchase, but this so irrationally annoyed me that I had to do something about it. It was as simple as downloading a mod, but had I not done so, I would have been constantly annoyed with this game. I mean, I wasn't paying attention to the world before, because my eyes were always drawn to that damn code, which I imagine is the opposite of the developer's intentions. Aiden as a character is someone who does what he can to present as a blank slate, not for any player projection, but to prevent enemies from discovering weaknesses or patterns that can be exploited. He wants to become the ghost in the machine that occasionally inhabits his vessel, and this is another benefit to Aiden as he intends to blend with the crowd. Aiden in the eyes of CTOS is literally a nameless, faceless bystander, and his rather unassuming and ordinary appearance aids in drawing our eyes elsewhere. Aiden never outright disappears, but takes comfort in our peripheral. We're always looking at what to hack next, the bullets quickly approaching, or the beauty of Chicago. Normally, I wouldn't find Chicago notable at all. It's simply gray with brown and more gray, clouded by rain, but it's the gloomy atmosphere portrayed so expertly that makes Chicago a miserable place I yearn for. It perfectly matches the story's tone. It's a place of grief, tears covering Aiden's vision. Much like Aiden's grief, it's at its best when it blurs the lens through which we see the world. Chicago during the day is fine, but feels bland compared to the melancholy. I wouldn't call the daytime ugly. The sights of autumn oak and blue skies separated by miles of concrete bring to mind a repose that is only uncanny by accompanying the story. We can't fully appreciate the environments during the early morning because we aren't at peace yet. There's still more to do. This makes the juxtaposed dusk feel as though everything in the game is playing into a central theme, a darker world full of vulnerability, where a morally questionable psychopath toils in the shadows as the good guy, only because those he chases are worse. But this city is not memorable for its weather, lighting, or dystopian stone towers, but for its people who feel alive. In many cities, there are cars on the street, people on the sidewalks, employers, employees, but they never feel real. This is because the player has a basic understanding of what a non-player character is, and sees them as no more than a nameless vessel in a sea of faceless bodies. What Watch Dogs achieves to remedy this to an extent is give them a name, a face, a story, and a dirty little secret. The moment an NPC has a name and a story, they become more than a collection of assets from an assembly line. They feel just a bit more real. We get access to their names, their occupation, their income, and a fact about them. This fact is often something intimate about the person, and the reason this is so engaging is because many people, myself included, love gossip. I relish in scouring the grapevine for juicy secrets and information that I shouldn't know, not for the purposes of spreading, but just for knowing. I like the minuscule rebellion that comes from moving your knowledge into restricted territory. Further, you can look at their texts, listen in on phone calls, and these conversations are often ordinary. It's not often you'll profile someone who's a convicted serial killer, but there is something tantalizing about seeing that Jeff has father issues or that Samantha has IBS. You can't often do anything with this information though, which means that the fun begins and ends with player curiosity. More could have been done with this system from a gameplay perspective. We do have one ability where we can siphon money from someone's bank account, but money comes easily and the places to spend it are sparse. What if we could use our knowledge against the people? Say we profile someone who we learn has changed their identity as part of a witness protection program. We could, in a stealth context, blackmail them, threatening to expose their true identity unless they create a distraction for us or offer a key into a restricted area. In the same way that within Assassin's Creed we can bribe someone to leave a window open, Aiden could send a text to an associate of the target blackmailing them to slash the target's tires, so when they try to escape by vehicle, it's easier for us. For now, the profiling is set dressing, but the people themselves will still get up to the usual shenanigans. Beatboxing, arguing on the phone, freestyling, playing their music out loud. There's plenty of activities to observe here, and it creates a city that feels as living as it could be. People on the street will react to your actions, and if you wish to interact with someone but you approach in a truck going 80 in a 50 zone, they'll be spooked and run away. The L train that rumbles above you is yet another example of Chicago being a living city, as pedestrians will jump both on and off at their designated spot, and so can you. When you enter the train, things carry on like normal. There's no loading screen, no scripted actions, you simply jump on, and the world moves through you. If you are in the middle of a police chase and attempt to use the train to escape, you'll see that the carts are vacant. People have heard the gunshots and screams approaching the station and have made the smart decision to stay away. These kinds of dynamic reactions are small, but they come together with all the aforementioned to form a world I could get properly immersed in. The police themselves work as expected, though they are enjoyably aggressive in most cases. I found that in the early game, when your vehicles aren't the fastest and your hacks are minimal, evading the fuzz was surprisingly tough. In many cases because they were faster than you. I didn't enjoy the CTOS scan that occurs when police are initially locating you because the search areas often overlap, and at times are faster than your car. If you have a high-speed sports car, you might be able to outrun it, but you can also use a jam comms consumable to help make it out. The problem that arises is that this is a test of attrition, but it's overshadowed by when the police are searching for you. You now have to bob and weave through sightlines and back alleys to escape, and true to the game's themes, you can turn off your car and hide in plain sight. I'll admit, it is a bit immersion breaking when the police police stop looking for you after exactly 1 minute. But the tension that comes from parking in a secluded lot, hiding in your car while the police slowly enclose on you like a slasher in a horror flick, were some of the most memorable moments in the game. I do wish that escaping had more feasible means to it, more specifically when it came to blending. During a particular mission, I gapped from a parking lot onto the train tracks and then onto the train during a police chase. The L train was unfortunately empty, meaning I was just riding it and constantly being followed. It would have fulfilled a true next level fantasy to hop into a car full of pedestrians packed like sardines just to hop off in 3 stops like I was never there, lost in the crowd, but alas, that was not possible. I have read that it is possible in other contexts, but I was unable to replicate it, and at that point, if the context is so sensitive, it sours the fantasy anyways. If you do end up in a fight, you'll see that the police hit their shots and shoot first, ask questions later. But it's when you get into a car chase that Watch Dogs shows off some of its best visuals, but worst gameplay. Driving itself is entirely disconnected from this discussion, as it feels great. Compared to the likes of Grand Theft Auto, what many consider to be the gold standard for open world driving, I would say I enjoy it more. Grand Theft Auto's driving feels good, but it's also slippery, and while I won't bother making any arguments for realism, I doubt you or I have gone 90 kilometers down a highway in an ice cream truck, but after some adjusting, I enjoy it just as much as any other open world game. Each vehicle handles differently, though I would have enjoyed the option to perform flips on a motorcycle. A bike is always what I went for, because seeing Aiden's coat flap in the wind at top speed as he clashes against the rain and oncoming traffic is something right out of a Batman movie. You don't have the ability to shoot and drive at the same time, which is disappointing, but as we'll see, is a minor oversight that has been blown out of proportion. The police are not the only things capable of preventing your escape, as the different islands present unique challenges. The loop sees the highest density of cars and people, but also long highways helpful for building up speed, only to take a turn into a large network of tunnels that run below. Alleyways are perfect for evasion or seclusion, and the polar opposite of this is Pawnee. On the outskirts of the city, we see less defined highways and bridges, and more back roads and dirt paths. Because the roads here are more freeform, there's room for jumps, which were less frequent in other districts. This makes the fourth act, almost the entirety of which takes place in Pawnee, more fun. Added freedom and danger put your steering skills to the test, but evading pursuers comes with the same issue. Your options for outrunning the opposition is to drive faster than them, which in the early game won't be possible, or you can engage in the hacking to give you some distance. The reason outdriving the police in the early game is tough is because the beginning acts are in the suburbs, where fast cars are rare. In the average vehicle, you'll need near expert driving to lose a pursuer, and odds are, a new player won't be skilled enough to execute this. But there is a solution, which is to engage with the hacking. You can hack certain objects to give you an advantage. My favorite is opening a garage door, driving through it, and then closing it on the way out to force the police to drive around, near guaranteeing an escape. Opportunities for these are rather rare, and in most cases you simply press a single button to initiate an auto hack. Through a power fantasy lens, these interactions are the peak of presentation. The camera shifts to showcase the destruction you cause and slows down so you can bask in the sight of a police car wrapping itself around a blocker, or to see a car get folded like an omelet after hacking an intersection to cause chaos. The problems occur when looking at what the player actually does to make this happen, which is next to nothing. The player doesn't even need more input necessarily, but making the timing more difficult could remedy how automatic this interaction is. The game has an enclosing square to tell you when exactly to initiate a hack, but what if instead the hackable objects were shown on the minimap, and you had to look behind you to execute the hack? Maybe that makes it too difficult, but then you need to rely more on setting yourself up for an escape. Instead of hacking an intersection at the right time so a pursuer is T-boned as it crosses the street, you could initiate a hack a few seconds prior, allowing you to slip through before there's a 4-car pileup that slows the opponent down. The problem with that now is we lose the spectacle. This is a problem throughout the gameplay of Watch Dogs, the idea that hacking is a unique idea and often looks cool, but in gameplay it serves to replace something that could otherwise be done without.
Soldier, what are you doing?
Playing games, sir.
You're playing games, but you ain't playing the sponsor of today's video, War Thunder?
I don't know what that is.
How have you not heard of the greatest vehicle combat game ever made?
Well, I just
There are over 2,000 highly detailed tanks, ships, helicopters, and more, all meticulously crafted for accuracy and immersion.
Wow, that sounds pretty fun. Where can I play it?
PS4, PS5, Xbox Series S and X, Xbox One, and PC.
Well, how serious is it?
There's game modes for sissy casuals like you, but I prefer the immersive competitive mode so I can satisfy the tactical man inside me.
There's a man inside you?
That's not what I meant. And before you go into battle, you can customize your vehicles to fit your aesthetic and strategic needs. Look at my helicopter. Ain't she a thing of beauty? Soars like an eagle and kicks like a mule. And this ain't your daddy's war game, because these graphics will knock your socks off, soldier.
Wow, Sergeant, this seems like a real immersive game. I mean, I can see through an X-ray lens exactly where me and my opponent's vehicles are hitting combat.
So what are you doing playing these other games when you can try War Thunder for absolutely no charge?
No fooling? Absolutely free?
Absolutely free. If you use my link in the description or pinned comment, you can claim a large bonus pack that includes multiple premium vehicles, a premium account, an exclusive 3D decorator for your vehicles, and much more. But act now. This offer is for a limited time only.
Wow, that sure sounds like fun.
You're damn right it does. Now get on the battlefield, use that link in the description, and thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video. Dismissed.
Nearly every tech-related action in Watch Dogs is mapped to a single button. This makes any interaction easily executed, but it also means that hacking requires no skill. This lack of depth would be excusable if the level design accommodated it, offering situations where the planning is what was challenging, not the execution, but that isn't the case, and it doesn't always have to be. The most basic hacks you'll execute is peering through the lens of cameras around the world. Security cams, body cams, laptop cams, anything with a lens you can see through. And through this, you can mark enemies so that they're visible through walls. While this kind of reconnaissance is just detective vision with more steps, it is a unique idea that adds layers to traditional missions. When trailing a target, you don't have to follow closely behind. You can just keep stalking them from the cams. If you need to hack something, you can, through the use of cameras, complete a mission without entering the area, which isn't always possible, but the fact that it sometimes is enough. When traversing the cameras, you need to play around their limited vision, and it's here that we're presented with gameplay that feels engaging. When we know we have to use the cameras, it was fun to try different angles to see which one would have our target in view. When body cams are introduced, you have moving cameras that further complicate things, which is enjoyable, but there's no further advancements. I don't mean to overanalyze the cameras, but it's the only hack with a significant amount of depth. Every other interactable is a press of a button that starts and ends with the immediate cause and effect. And it gets worse, because the cause is always the same, a tap of square. There are three kinds of hacks: barriers, explosives, and distractions. Some may only consider two of these hacks, as both an explosion and a barrier being raised will cause any bystanders to react. When raising a barrier, you do just that. The game pushes this idea that you're turning the environment to your advantage, but really, you are creating a battlefield that the game could have already set in place. Enemies can use cover too, so the environment is becoming more complicated, and in cases where the game offers 2 whole minutes to prepare an ambush, you end up just activating all the barriers through continual square taps and placing some IEDs. If the remote barriers were replaced by natural cover, vehicles, debris, generators, they would skip the tedium and the unavoidable question of what purpose do these barriers serve outside of being cover. I must admit, there is one practical application, which is that when an enemy is behind cover, you can deactivate it, exposing them. But these moments were rare, and often bypassed by a sharp bullet. Explosives are immediately useful for offering an easy pick on an enemy or two, but that is where their depth ends. There is some strategy to be had with said free kills, as the explosion will surely draw the attention of those nearby, but this can be achieved through many means, and its result is just an enemy being in position for one of 2 follow-ups, being a bullet to the head or an IED at their feet. There are opportunities to destroy transformers, which will black out an area, but the darkness doesn't serve much of a purpose outside of a negligible detection speed decrease. Keeping said blackout on a timer means enemies need to be in position to be properly executed. Generally, I believe stealth should never be paired with a time limit because stealth is a game of patience and planning. A time limit forces the player to take too many risks, and in Watch Dogs' case, the blackout doesn't assist you in taking down enemies. An ability like the blackout should offer you a limited window to exploit a weakness, but the blackout doesn't create enough of a weakness to justify it. Limiting the invisible vision cones is not enough to warrant the risk associated with acting fast, and chances are you're better off taking your time without the blackout, because what's the first thing that happens when the lights go out? You become alert. The same occurs when jamming comms. You aren't creating a distraction, you're sowing chaos, which hampers a ghost-like playstyle. But hey, maybe it's my fault for asking the game to cater to my needs, rather than tailoring my playstyle to what the game provides. The problem that continually appears is that when you play to the game's strengths, you don't engage in the hacking at all. Let's hold on to this idea while we look back at the stealth. There are lures that can be activated remotely to distract enemies. Once you close the gap, you can either use the silenced pistol or the baton. Cover works reliably, and while the controls take some getting used to, they eventually work well. You find yourself entering cover, slinking around corners, and scanning the room through cameras, finding that many methods of dispatching a target are loud and lethal. This is a problem because once enemies are alert, they will detect you faster, but it is still one that can be played around. This is the extent of the hacking, and a majority of your tools like the IED and lures are ones that are not out of place in any other stealth game. Hell, Spider-Man has remote activated lures. The technology available to Aiden never exceeds or separates itself from the more practical tools we already know. Despite this, stealth is still enjoyed through its most creatively lacking facets. It's not original to move through the shadows with a baton in one hand and a silenced pistol in the other, choosing to execute those in front of you like John Wick, or in my case, attempting to be as non-lethal as possible like Batman but without the money. In fact, Batman is actually a great place to look at where technology could have been taken, as the wealthy vigilante has many gadgets that serve new functions and not simply streamline or reskin previous utilities. In Arkham Knight, Batman had an AI voice synthesizer that could trick enemies into taking radio instructions from their boss. This could easily be a tool in Watch Dogs to move enemies into position, and one that someone like Aiden could pull off given the technology he has access to. Further tools in the environment could be used to Aiden's advantage outside of explosions. What if there were cranes that Aiden could control, moving the heavy cargo they carry right above a group of goons and dropping it on them? At most, we can drop a crane's cargo, but again, these function like a junction box where it's a thoughtless free kill. Instead, what we have is a weak presence of technology, and what few major displays of hacking there are, like blackouts, are stunted by their limited duration and usefulness. When you are in combat, you'll see Watch Dogs is at its best, and at its worst. The gunplay is tight, responsive, guns have kick, and the takedowns are glorious. But again, I have to ask the question, where's the hacking in this? The answer is hidden, literally. Your options for hacking are as slim as it gets, with the highlights being the defense at T-Bone Scrapyard, that contain traps, turrets, and other things for you to use to take down your enemies in between peeking from cover. But that is the peak, with much of the rest of the game being the valleys. The average shootout will see you relying on guns and rather basic shooting that, while having depth, does not see any actual technology. Mostly. The only exception is jamming enemy comms, which gives you some time to reposition, perform a takedown, or otherwise set up your next move. There are some nice ideas present here, like the ability to shoot a live grenade to make it explode early, and the different context-sensitive takedowns like sliding over cover to kick whoever is in front of you looks just as good as Aiden's many pistol-based executions. Focused aggression is the most rewarding playstyle, and is aided by focus, a bullet time mechanic that allows you to quickly pick off thugs who forgot their helmets, and is something I wish every game had. It creates combat that is endlessly visceral and conflicts slightly with the game's tone and plot. Without diving too much into a side tangent, Watch Dogs presents Aiden as a good person who has a few skeletons in his closet, notably a few victims. Despite this, the game gives you plenty of tools to not defend yourself, but actively chew up and spit out thousands of guards by the end of the game. Aiden fights like an animal when controlled by a skilled player, and it's the most rewarding playstyle, to plow through enemy patrols with speed, aggression, and finesse. If you want to achieve this, you need to plan. Maybe this is the true purpose of the stealth, not to thin the numbers, but to analyze your environment and plan your explosive entrance. If you see that there is a heavily armored goon, you know that he must be taken out with a lot of explosives or up close. So your plan could be to isolate the enemy and take down the surrounding lackeys. Combat is at its worst when it's slow, like when going toe-to-toe with Iraq. He's in a suit fit for a juggernaut, and the solution to his heavy armor is to just pump him full of bullets and explosives, running away before he can close the gap with his shotgun. I believe that when these are the lows of combat, we have something special on our hands. But ultimately, the depth here is in rather typical Ubisoft fashion, not taught to you. You aren't shown the finesse combat has, and so you assume there is none, and in fairness, maybe you don't need a game to teach you how to aim and shoot, but it's increasingly odd when we see the tutorials given to the different hacks that grasp at straws attempting to convince you of its value. Oh boy, wouldn't it be cool if you could jam an enemy's comms to stun them temporarily, or distract them with a fake text message? Yes, Watch Dogs, it would be cool, but why is that better than permanently removing the enemy with a bullet to the head? You might argue, as I foolishly did, that you can be non-lethal, but there's no reward to doing so. In fact, the game doesn't even acknowledge it. In a later mission, Jackson ends up in a criminal stronghold, and it's our job to deal with the surrounding thugs. I knew that if we rescued Jax, he'd likely see the dirty work on the way out, so as I maintained up to this playthrough, I used melee attacks to defeat enemies in front of me, using the baton that I had assumed was the non-lethal option. But unfortunately, there was no difference. I was made to feel like a killer, and you know what? Fine. It's more fun to be violent in this game. But then I wonder, why is there a morality system? You can either be a criminal or a vigilante in this game, but what influences your alignment is not what you think. When stopping a petty crime, you get good morality points, but you lose some points for killing the criminal. Killing any criminal outside of these missions is seen as good, but shooting any police officer is seen as bad. Even if the police are as corrupt as they come, you can never shoot back without your reputation taking a hit. Wait a minute, does this mean Watch Dogs is taking a political stance? Oh, fuck, dude! I kid. I mean, Aiden's morality is outside of the law regardless. In fact, Aiden's entire vigilante persona wouldn't exist without the ineptitude of the police in catching his niece's killer. And now this video is political. Fuck! Ultimately, Watch Dogs does have some politics within it, and some major characters are mayors or are controlling things like elections. The furthest Watch Dogs goes with this is saying that the government is corrupt, which is about as politically lukewarm as saying racism is bad, but I digress. Aiden, despite having a detailed history of criminal activity, is predetermined to be a good guy. Every story mission and side mission, regardless of execution, rewards you with points towards becoming the vigilante, and being such plays a role in the story. So why then is this game at its best when you're tearing through gangsters and torturing those responsible for your niece's death? I wish I knew. But what I do know is that this morality system is just meaningless. Gameplay overall is, ironically outside the hacking elements, really good. Watch Dogs is one of the rare games I crave a return to, because the relentless force of Aiden's moveset is matched with the rain pounding against the pavement. The gameplay may not complement the story or even the premise, but it does aid the atmosphere. In other facets, it's supplemental. Cash can be obtained by hacking someone's bank account, which is a cool idea and concept, but it's the press of a button, often done while you're in the middle of something else. You aren't even slowing down, you're just looking over for a moment. One upgrade allows you to hack a car's alarm so you can quickly enter without alerting anyone, but this changes nothing in gameplay. Despite this, the hacking minigame that bars you off from networks is done well enough. I can understand criticisms that it still stops at the press of square, but the puzzles near the end of the game took some genuine thought. I believe it takes too long for said puzzles to ramp up, but I appreciate their infancy here, even if later challenges can be as dull as the puzzle resetting itself, which adds tedium as a source of fake difficulty. Fortunately, the level design seems to avoid being stale or too repetitive, offering different contexts for you to commit mass murder. Watch Dogs has one of the strongest openings in a game that I have ever played. The concept is explained quickly, and our protagonist's motives are done the same, but we oddly start at the apparent end of our story. We got the bad guy, and our objective is to shoot him, and of course, not doing so, we move through a populated stadium and use a blackout to mask our escape. This is a near-perfect tutorial that explains the basics of the game and offers an immediate hook to keep players drawn in. Once fully into the game, you'll become familiar with Watch Dogs' act structure, and its different mission structures too. Each act or chapter concerns a character or item that Aiden must attempt to get, with the exception of the first chapter. The first act is the most exciting because all the gameplay is new, but the weakest is easily Act 3. This is because the third act is one of the longest, and yet its goal always feels within reach. But not in the sense that Aiden is so close yet keeps stumbling, but in that the game forces Aiden to take a more complicated approach to a problem he has solved multiple times leading up to it. Breaking into Iraq's headquarters is deemed undoable, and with this we have to enlist the help of someone from the inside. While Bedbug is an interesting character, once this convoluted plan falls apart, Aiden decides to just infiltrate the headquarters anyways, and what sucks is that it's so much fun. You mow through a small army during this mission, and yet it makes every mission leading up to this feel boring, not just because you could have done this from the start, but because the preceding missions had relatively boring concepts. One of said mission archetypes is the stealth infiltration, which is often done by Aiden. You move from cover to cover to sneak by enemies, and mechanically you press X to move, so the challenge is for finding an opening or creating one through distractions and capitalizing off of it. When doing a stealth mission with Bedbug, we must escort him twice through a restricted area, and when doing so, we spy through the cameras and select where we want him to go, using our hacks to create opportunities along the way. Sound familiar? The new perspective and lack of defense is interesting, but not for as long as the game hopes. Again, Watch Dogs is at its best when being an aggressive shooter, and a mission that strips you of the fantasy sticks out as one I'd skip. Don't believe me? It's confirmed when you finally enter the hideout. You enter the hideout to hack into one of Iraq's files, but these files are encrypted, meaning you need to get to the server in person to access them. This is something you do frequently at the different CTOS servers, which must be completed before attempting a mission in a new district. These puzzles were often simple, but a few did stump me for some minutes. The only part of these puzzles that annoy me is that it's the peak. The difference between Iraq's server and the CTOS servers is that you need to get there physically. So what does Aiden do? He enters the hideout and goes full John Wick mode. It's fun, intense, and yet it made everything up to the point not just narratively obsolete, but mechanically boring in comparison. Something rather subjective is that a majority of these missions take place in the slums, which don't offer much in the way of interesting environments. Watch Dogs is at its best when it's in the big city. Long stretches of road, fast cars, and a skyline shrouded by security cameras and dense high-rises. The slums in comparison have rather slow cars, most cover is just rubbled barricades, and the technology is more limited. When it comes to traversal, you don't change whatever way you're driving, you simply just do it slower. This, though, is remedied in Act 4. The mission structure improves come Act 4 as we track down Raymond Kenny. The environment here is more challenging than before, as you now have to move through dirt side paths, thin streets, and with cars are more likely bikes that move fast enough. The greatest success of this act is that something actually happens. We achieve our goal in the intended means and in a reasonable time. We find Kenny and get him out in just a few missions, and after what felt like hours of Iraq dragging his heels, this was sorely needed. The actual objectives here play into the game's strengths, which is a shooter power fantasy with some stealth strongholds mixed in. One quest you'll become acutely familiar with is the convoy. On the map, you'll be shown the path of a convoy, and the objective is to destroy it. These missions were always enjoyable because there's a large amount of player choice in how much setup takes place and and how they intend to stop the convoy. I like to move down the line and create a barricade of vehicles and IEDs where I think the convoy will stop, meaning the setup takes time, but the execution is near instant. Compare this to a few missions where you're given a time limit to prepare defenses, and we see that the convoys do more for player agency. You now choose your time limit by setting up closer or farther away, and because the site is dynamic, the variables are too. It's a mission that isn't beaten into the ground in the main questline, but does appear frequently in the side content. These missions don't have a ton of room for hacking, which is a phrase I'm beginning to repeat a lot, but the sentiment that's still fun also rings true. I've mostly spoken on the mundane and the basic objectives in between the high budget moments, but I want to now focus on another strength, which is that the story is always presenting something interesting for you to do. If you were to ask me what my favorite moments were, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Do I speak on the levels with the best atmosphere, like when you're posing as Crispin to infiltrate the human trafficking ring? We move through this high security show as we spectate the auction, which is one of the last places in this world to value the individual above their data, even if in a horrific way. Walking through this place of disgusting corruption as a paragon of justice among all the people who want you dead is one of many moments where I intentionally walked slowly, as I couldn't pass up how cinematic it looked. I could speak about the most unique gameplay mix-ups, with the prison being a highlight, as we have to stealthily move through the concrete walls in a bare-bones run that ends with a shotgun massacre and an escape through the roof, through driving along the train tracks. It actually made use of hacking, seeing as Aiden hacked the police system to change his name, and in gameplay we get to use the cameras more to our advantage because our defensive capabilities were limited. Maybe I want to talk about one of the final missions where we finally take down Lucky Quinn, as it's full of narrative reveals, atmosphere, challenging stealth, and it's the point where Aiden abandons his past life and enters his new life as the nameless vigilante, for better or worse. I could go on, but this video is already long enough, and I think the point has been made. There are high points everywhere. Level design is often varied, and when it isn't, it's carried by the gameplay, which is always tight enough to entertain, at least when there is actual gameplay. There are some missions that use hacking as a means of replacing a task that could already be done without it, and other missions aren't much of anything if not displays of atmosphere. Tailing missions, for example, are interesting when used through the cameras, and tailing in a vehicle doesn't happen at all, or does it? When downloading something from a fleeing target, you need to stay within their range to download the hack. At first I thought this was an interesting way of incorporating hacking into gameplay, but upon further thought, this is just a tailing mission with extra steps. These nitpicks are easily overlooked when considering the level variety, and this variety extends to the series of side quests that have nothing to do with hacking and yet tragically are incredibly memorable and fun. Around the map you can find dealers that'll give you a hallucinogenic drug, which act as the excuse for 4 different otherworldly trips. But of course, this is a hacking game, so the title it's given is Digital Trip. Digital trips are a fun side tangent, yet feel so disconnected from the main game, especially the psychedelic trips, which see Aiden flying through the air to the tune of distorted jazz. It's memorable because it's a complete contrast to the rest of the game. In the real world, Aiden is completely lucid, calculating his every move, and the atmosphere is gloomy and grief-riddled. Here, it's just good vibes. Well, almost. I think the detection for some of these flowers is brutal, and some of the later levels become difficult because there will be a small piece of environment blocking your way, which really kills my high. Fortunately, you can harness that anger in the Madness trip, which sees you commandeering a hell charger fit for Robbie Race, and with time limit tasks to keep you occupied. I found that the aesthetic here wore off faster, but maybe my tolerance was getting too high, which continues into the next 2 digital trips, which takes a stealth approach. Alone and Watched see you in a post-technological apocalypse, slinking around corners to hack databases and defeat hidden robots. Both of these game modes are fun enough, but they lack what made the base game interesting, which was the tools and options. In these modes, your tools are limited, and while a bare-bones run can encourage new strategies, it also sows tedium. Too often did these restrictions feel arbitrary, and perhaps I was setting myself up for failure expecting the same highs of the psychedelics, but at least the spider tank is the closest we get to catching our dragon. Piloting the spider tank is incredibly fun, and how the developers came up with this idea is beyond me, but the execution is done well. You move through time-based challenges similar to the Madness trip, but the tank is far more enjoyable to pilot as it speeds up walls and clears buildings in a single bound. You ironically crush the civilians and cars like bugs, collecting upgrades along the way. It's a ton of fun, but our high is fading, and nothing is worse than a come down from a euphoric high. And unfortunately for us, we come down all the way to multiplayer, which actually has some beauty to it. That is, if it weren't covered in buggy blotches and connection issues staining every interaction. The basic online free roam works well enough, well, when it works. Connecting to a friend was outright impossible for me, but during the pre-game free roam, it worked as intended, even when connecting to people far away. But again, this was only sometimes, as other times I was debilitated by a glitch that prevented me from moving. I would push a stick forward or hold W and be sent in circles. The remedy for this was aiming down sights, which then let me run in one direction, but it made discovering invaders a crapshoot. Even when the controls work, invasions don't go as planned because the PvP balancing is non-existent. During any point in the main story, another player can invade your game disguised as a civilian. You'll get a notification in a highlighted zone on the map showing you roughly where the invader is. Their goal is to act like an NPC see and evade your watchful eye, but you have the profiler to help distinguish the real from the fake. When you discover the fixer, you have to take them down. A kill means victory, but if you cannot discover them within the time limit, you lose. The problem lies in the weapons, specifically explosives and cars. If you have a grenade launcher, you can stun lock and juggle your victim for almost the entire invasion, and you as the victim are powerless. God forbid they run out of grenades, they can just hop into a car and run you over once, back up, hit you again, which creates another stun lock. I know this isn't hard to do because I was able to do it to others, and at first it's funny, but then it gets really old because the encounter ends sometimes seconds after it begins. The invader has the advantage, and it just made it boring. If these stun locking strategies were better balanced, I could have enjoyed this a lot more because the gunplay in other PvP modes was competent even at higher ping. Alternatively, you can invade others without their knowledge in the tracking minigame. It's the same idea, track and steal someone's data, but the victim isn't told about it, and while this is a fun idea, I'm not sure what the point is. I mean, I was likely silently invaded in my playthrough a handful of times, but so what? I can't praise it much because it doesn't add anything, but it also never intrudes, so I guess it's just a thing and it's here. What is also just here is the racing, which works exactly as intended and offers some solid fun. The hacking genuinely makes a difference here too, as timing plays a larger role when trying to sabotage your opponent. Nothing hurts more than nearly gaining the lead just for someone to hack a barricade, totaling your car. But it's also so satisfying to gain the upper hand through blowing pipes in the ground. These hacks are not free as they can easily sabotage you, and I've had hacks backfire before. All in all, this was really fun, and that leads into the gunfights too. There's a series of PvP modes that boil down to shooting other players while holding an objective, and these modes were a surprising amount of fun. No doubt in part to Watch Dogs' excellent gunplay. Mechanics translate to multiplayer well, and one taps to the head feels so good. It's when playing against people on keyboard and mouse that the game feels at its best because you can actually compete on controller. It's not often shooting feels this good on controller, and I can't commend the game enough for it. Many of these modes where you need to take an objective can devolve into 4 or 5 people killing each other over and over in a series of hot potato, but it is still something I could see myself returning to. I wish there were a little more co-op options, but it's not like these days it matters, because finding people to play this with is the biggest hurdle. So with that said, shout out to Roblox Forever for being the most consistent player in all the games. Overall, these game modes were fun enough and are a nice supplement to the main story, especially when you want to break from the doom and gloom of it. The gameplay as a whole is well made, but I just wish hacking played more of a role in its execution. Using cameras to case an objective is the closest we get to hacking being center stage, and the remedies for this are easily visible in this game's sequel. It might be disappointing in a vacuum, but when playing the rest of the series, it further separates this game and always provides a reason for me to come back. Everything here is fun, even if it's not very happy like the digital trips, but man, do most of the other side missions continue into the moody aesthetic, with many of the audio logs being more and more depressing, but also enriching the story to a point where some of the audio logs should have been closer to the story, as without it, certain characters fall to the wayside, and I can tell if you found these audio logs through one decision: to kill or spare Maurice.
No, what happened? Why was she staring at me? Fuck me! And that little girl died. I killed her.
Watch Dogs begins seemingly at the end of your journey. Aiden used to be a fixer, but when a hacking job at the hotel called the Merlot went wrong due to his partner's greed and the presence of a third hacker, he attracts the attention of the mob. When on a Sunday drive with his niece Lena and Pawnee, 2 hitmen were to kill him, and did so by shooting Aiden's tire out, and while Aiden survived the wreck, his niece wasn't as lucky. This led Aiden on a journey to track down the killer, through the help of an anonymous contact at the hacktivist group DedSec. Our story begins with Aiden pointing a gun at Maurice, the gunman, but Aiden can't kill him yet because he needs to discover who is responsible for the hit. After some complications from his charismatic assistant Jordy, Aiden has to make an escape. Aiden's relationship with his sister Nikki and her son Jackson is dwindling, and Aiden has been different since the crash. He's taken his role of big brother a little too seriously, spying on Nikki, and when he discovers that someone is threatening her, he gives chase and tracks down the harasser, which happens to be a ghost from the past, his partner from the Merlot. Damien requests Aiden's help in finding out who the third person was at the Merlot, and after Aiden denies him, Damien kidnaps Nikki. Aiden gets Jackson to a safe spot and begins tracking down leads, playing Damien's game in hopes of rescuing his sister. To help him, Aiden meets face to face with his DedSec contact for the first time to get internal access to the CTOS system. After Aiden's safe house is compromised, he and the DedSec contact Clara take solace in an old CTOS bunker that cannot be traced. In their efforts to find the third Merlot hacker, they end up at a concrete fortress owned by Iraq, the person, and Aiden invades to steal the hard drive that has dirt on everyone, including politicians, which gave Iraq power. Aiden and Clara are skilled hackers, but the encryption on Iraq's files are next level, and they enlist the help of Raymond Kenny, aka T-Bone, to help them. Kenny previously worked for Bloom, the company behind CTOS, but went off the grid after he caused a citywide blackout in 2003. He did this to warn the people that CTOS would be too powerful, but in the process, 11 people were killed. When we find Kenny, he is reluctant to help, but assumably out of guilt or in an attempt at redemption, he decrypts the files, but not before another hacker by the name of Default is able to intercept the download. Default is an incredibly skilled hacker whose sudden intervention is a bit confusing, and after Aiden gets the files back from him, he sort of disappears for the rest of the campaign. But he is important because he reveals that Clara was the one tracking Aiden down, and had an indirect hand in killing Lena. After all these trials, tribulations, and still not having the information Damien wants, Aiden's identity is revealed to the public, and he makes a last-ditch effort to stop playing Damien's game, rescue Nikki, and get his remaining family out of Chicago. This goes according to plan, but not before Nikki and Jackson discover who Aiden is, and more damning, what he has done. Eventually, Kenny decrypts the hard drive, which reveals that the person who called the hit on Aiden is Lucky Quinn, the head of the mob. Aiden has to return to the Merlot, Quinn's base of operations, to kill him, and before doing so, he finds out that Quinn had sent the hit because he thought Aiden knew of the blackmail Quinn had on various politicians. And with that, Aiden puts an end to his life by hacking his pacemaker. As he's leaving, Aiden gets word that a hit has been put out on Clara, and despite his best efforts, Aiden is not able to save her in time. Now that Aiden has achieved his goal and lost many along the way, he decides to leak all the blackmail gathered from Iraq's server, which angers Damien, who has found a way inside CTOS and has control over the entire city. As Chicago is in chaos, T-Bone and Aiden toil away on a virus which eventually blocks Damien out and reveals his location, a lighthouse on the outskirts of the city. Aiden arrives to take him down but finds that Jordy is turned on him. Aiden is able to turn the tables and kill Damien, but Jordy gets away. We then see a montage of the events after the game and how the city is reacting to CTOS, and we receive a final parting gift from Jordy. Maurice in a garage, broken. We get one final decision: kill or spare Maurice. Maurice is easily my favorite character in the entire game. He's posed as the bad guy for the entire plot, and yet that isn't true. In audio logs around Chicago, you can learn more about who Maurice is, and why he did what he did, and the answer is that he had to. This is why I can tell if you've heard the audio logs, because anyone aware of Maurice's story knows that he is as much of a victim as Aiden is, if not more so. Let me explain. Maurice worked for the mob because he, like many, fell upon hard times. He wasn't a fixer because he was a bad guy necessarily, but his actions were a matter of circumstance. The problem is, as with any criminal work, once you're in the game, you don't get to leave. Maurice wanted out, but the mob wasn't going to allow that. In turn, his life was turned upside down. He just wanted to leave the city with his girlfriend, and by the end of everything, his love was taken from him.
Take it out. At first I thought she just left me. I've been dead, beat the fuck up. I couldn't blame him. I took to work her friends. No one's heard from her. And then those bastards called me again. They said I screwed up the bitch job. No more chances. I begged them not to kill her. I begged them to kill me instead. And the son of a bitch said he was feeling generous. He wasn't gonna kill her. He's gonna send her to an auction instead. A fucking auction. How do I get her out of that? They got tracking shit on the girls. Get them so fucked up on Snack, don't even remember their name. So Christ, Abby. The sick fuck who called me. He said that it was clean. I was free to live my life. What fucking life have I got?
By the time we find him, he's already broken, having had everything taken from him, and when we return at the end of the game, we see that he's been through every layer of hell. Throughout the entire story, Maurice has been tortured by Jordy to the point where he can barely think straight, and it's in what could be his final moments that Watch Dogs' many mysteries begin. Maurice does not beg for his life. In fact, he encourages Aiden to end it, as he has nothing left. But after a while, he begins repeating numbers, specifically 1, 2, 3, 5, always struggling to say 4.
1, 2, 3, 5.
There's a few theories as to what these numbers refer to. The first has roots in Maurice's guilt. Maurice made it clear that he never wanted to kill Lena and that his intention was to scare Pierce. The license plate of presumably Aiden's car during the crash contains the numbers 1, 2, 3, 5. Since all of his current torture is caused by one fatal mistake, perhaps he cannot get those numbers out of his mind, in the same way he can't get Lena's face out of his mind. I've seen this one a few times online and there's just one problem with it. That isn't Aiden's license plate. Maybe it's an obscure cutscene shot, but I couldn't find any instance where that license plate showed up. Another theory that holds some water is that Jordi is employing a common torture technique against Maurice, in which the victim is tasked with counting to 5, but has pain inflicted as they reach the number 4. Eventually, the victim will struggle to say the number 4 in sequence because it results in pain. Maurice's continued repeating of the numbers could be an attempt to regain his bearings on reality, and the frustration could be the realization that he is still mentally broken. The final theory many get behind is that he is repeating the Fibonacci sequence. Through a different set of audio logs, we can find there is a program called Bellwether, that, as the name implies, tracks data and its influence. But it seems that in the Watch Dogs universe, the CTOS can achieve subliminal messaging, and the impact of such messages are gauged by Bellwether. Angelina Balik, a Bloom employee, decided in an audio log to drop the Fibonacci sequence into the system and see if it bounces back. This could be why Maurice repeats the numbers, as they are the first few digits of the sequence, barring the first 2. The true sequence is 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, and so on, but I imagine skipping the first number is for brevity's sake. We see this all over the CTOS, and Maurice repeating the numbers, someone going through years of torture, thus being highly susceptible to influence, acts as more or less proof that Angelina's experiment worked, in a rather horrifying way. Further proof takes place in a side quest where Aiden has to track down a serial killer, and the bodies are found next to a series of numbers, all of which are part of the sequence. There are other instances of the sequence, but I think I've shown enough to make a solid case. The only issue with this theory lies with Angelina's plan, and a lack of detail surrounding it. I would like to have known more about this conspiracy and how it would work, but this is mostly all we see, which might be a praise given that this is much creepier when we don't know the details. But back to Maurice. Aiden's comment about he and Maurice not being so different, while a tad cliche, is abundantly true. Both had their loved ones taken from them, and the largest difference between the two is that Aiden got a second chance. Maurice lost his wife, lost everything, and even after that, he faced months of guilt and eventually days, potentially weeks, of torture to the point that his psyche is in shambles. Sure, Aiden helped Maurice in a way as he kills Quinn, the one responsible for his wife's fate. He stops an auction and other human trafficking excursions, potentially saving Maurice's wife in the process, or at least avenging her, and hey, he maybe then gives Maurice a chance to start over, find some semblance of normal, which is what he was fighting for. His final out was taking down Pierce, one last job to secure what he believed was freedom from the mob. He was never meant to kill Lena, but when Maurice had his gun pointed at Aiden, he saw the kid in the back seat and got cold feet, opting to instead shoot the tire causing the crash, hoping they would survive and understand the message. And yet, after everything, there's a chance that Maurice was successful. On that day that Lena died, Aiden did too. It was the beginning of his transformation into the fox. When we pick up as Aiden, he is lifeless, his voice in a constant growl, his face permanently scowled, and all of his actions are meticulously chosen. This isn't to say he's a blank slate, he has clear motivations and values, but it's as though a large part of Aiden died when Lena did too. And the birth of the vigilante is a trauma response in Lena's name, because if Aiden can dedicate the rest of his life to stopping bad people, then his guilt can be soothed. With each criminal empire brought to the ground, and with each thug taken down, Lena's death isn't for nothing. It's in the final encounter with Quinn that we see Aiden truly accept the role of the fox and leave his old life behind. His family is presumably by this point far away from Chicago and safe, and he has finally achieved his revenge. And in a subversion of expectations, Aiden revels in the victory. He explains that he feels like a weight has been lifted off of his shoulders.
Quinn's dead. This is the part where I'm supposed to say I feel empty, right? I'd be lying to myself. I finally feel awake, like I can breathe again. And Lena? Nothing can change her death. But maybe I can still do something that'll make a difference.
I appreciate that Aiden didn't feel remorse, or that getting revenge didn't solve his problems. He set out to bring justice to someone who would otherwise never have been held accountable. And Aiden was the only one capable of doing it. Anyone else who wanted to touch Lucky Quinn had piles of blackmail to be used against them, and enough henchmen to make any physical fight over before it began. Anyone who hopes to take him down needs to be someone with nothing to lose. A blank slate, a ghost. And these prerequisites are exactly what many misunderstand about Aiden. Aiden is not a bland character, but his environment requires him to appear as such. He must calculate his every move, word, and action to blend in as much as possible to not allow any cracks to form. This never perfectly works out for him, as when he first meets Clara, she sees right through the tricks.
I'm sorry I was rough before.
I know what you were doing, trying to intimidate me. Very textbook. Stepping into my personal space, the stare, physical contact. You are trying to look for cracks. So did you find any?
Some have criticized his designs for being bland, but that's the point. Aiden needs to blend in with the crowd. He needs to be just another nameless face, and he comes to understand this role throughout the game, something many have misunderstood. Some have criticized Aiden for not having a proper character arc, but I feel the real issue, if you deem it so, is that Aiden's arc isn't blatant. He does not grow as a person over the course of the game, but he eventually realizes his role in all of this. And we as the player learn more about Aiden through each mission. When the game begins, Aiden is a blank slate like many people see him, but by the end we know his motivations, which are not simply revenge, it's about justice. His motivation is somewhat revenge-based, but as previously stated, it's also a matter of repenting. Aiden blames himself for Lena's death, and he wants to keep his remaining family safe at all costs. There are further audio logs that mention where Nikki and Jackson are after the game, and it's revealed that they are entirely off the grid, where even Aiden doesn't know where they are. And while he wants to reach out and reconnect, he knows it could jeopardize them, and that's assuming they'd want to forgive him anyways. It should be noted that even though Aiden is ultimately doing good, he's still a killer. A lethal protector that in gameplay murders potentially thousands by the end of the campaign, and in canon still kills a handful of people. Even if it's justified, it's hard being affiliated with an outlaw, and one that is capable of so much. Almost everyone who gets involved with Aiden dies by the end of the story, and those who don't are still scarred by his actions. Jackson, when being rescued by Pierce, has full view of the Fox in action, through the security cameras, and Aiden kills a small army. Jackson is rightfully scared, and I believe this scene was meant to have larger implications because Aiden has barely any reaction to this. What's worse is that in said mission, I had already known Jackson was watching and I decided to non-lethally take down the enemies, but the cutscenes didn't change. Which brings me to the first major issue with the story, which is the moral standing of Aiden Pierce. Aiden is a morally great character. He'll kill if he has to, or if the death of someone is a net positive on society, functioning like any anti-hero or lethal protector. The problem is that Aiden endangers people's lives far more than the game likes to call attention to. And the moment you question any of the accidents here is enough to break immersion. The next few points are going to seem like nitpicks, but bear with me because they will become more relevant in a moment. Let's look at your primary means of income, which is hacking people's bank accounts. Is this morally okay? Maybe so, maybe not. Perhaps hacking someone in the slums for a few $100s is enough to push them under the poverty line. Further, if someone is under the poverty line, they may get desperate for cash and look to crime to make ends meet, which means you could be creating another Maurice and eventually another dead niece. That, I'll admit, is a stretch, but let's look elsewhere. Each hack causes damage to city infrastructure. Blowing a steam pipe would cost thousands, and hacking an intersection creating a pileup to stop an enemy is almost guaranteed to leave someone injured or dead. Then let's look at how many cars you actually steal in the game and the amount of dead bodies left in your path. All people that could have gotten second chances. Now this has no bearing on the story, but it definitely has bearing on the morality alignment, which I'm convinced was added for the sake of having a morality meter, or that its ideas were heavily cut by the time of the full release. It impacts two things, the police and the radio. When driving around, you can hear the news talking about how the people either love you or hate you, and on a good path, you'll see that citizens are less likely to call the police when you commit crimes, but on an evil route, civilians will sometimes call on sight. You'd rarely know this though, because the game near forces you down the morally good path. Every mission rewards a ton of points to the good side, and every side mission offers the same. What gives you points to the opposite side is injuring civilians and killing police officers. So actually trying to go down the dark path requires an insane number of police shootouts, and even then, after a few missions, you'll be back on track. Now where this impacts the story is that some people see Aiden as a monster, i.e. Jackson when Aiden rescues him or when Nikki finds out that he's the Fox, but the general public likes him so much that they are willing to hide information about him from the police. My issue here is that there shouldn't be a morality gauge at all because it muddies Aiden's character, and it prompts far more questions than answers. Keep Aiden morally gray, keep him complex. Don't devolve to a simple bar that gauges public perception. No matter which way you slice it, Aiden's morally gray. And I mean, the first person we see him working with is Jordy, a hired gun that is completely psychotic in the best ways possible.
I called the cops.
You did.
Oh, yeah, true story. So, cops arrive, and Maurice's little band of brothers arrive, and pow, 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 pow.
Jordy, tell me you're joking.
No, I called them too. Look, we get a messy altercation at the end of the game. You and I slip away undetected. You'll appreciate the plan tomorrow.
Jordy showcases one of the plot's greatest assets, which is its sparse humor that always lands. Jordy is the opposite side of Aiden's coin, who isn't in it for revenge or justice, but rather for the money, and he seems to enjoy it a little too much.
So, people like this feel nice and secure living way up here. I mean, these people just had a simple chain lock on their door. I guess they want to have a good look at the pizza guy before they open it all the way.
Jordy is old school. He presents well and never leaves loose ends untied. And while we don't learn much of him, he's always a fun break from the tension. But the best humor comes from our first meeting with Clara, and it might be my favorite joke of the entire series.
Bad boy.
What?
Bad boy, 17.
What the fuck, man?
Clara's character shines most on consecutive playthroughs. She, like many, is motivated by guilt, and it's in the scenes mentioning Aiden's family that we see her become quiet or avoid the topic entirely. We eventually learn that she was the one leaving flowers at Lena's grave, and that she and Aiden are both fighting for the same thing: justice. I enjoyed seeing their friendship evolve through the game, and we can see very small windows in which Aiden's personality actually shines through, but of course, the one person he opens up to dies just days later. Raymond Kenny is yet another character driven by guilt, but unlike Aiden and Clara, T-Bone initially decided to run from his problems, but with the help of Aiden is able to try and right his wrongs. Ray has a vendetta against the CTOS, and it's with him that we get some more, albeit unintentional, comedic relief. I say unintentional because when playing as Aiden, we have nothing but harsh grunts and sparse words, yet T-Bone offers more personality with some American twang. A grungy redneck is a perfect addition to this band of misfits, and his morals are strong, which I'll expand upon more when we cover the expansion that takes place a year after this game, Bad Blood. Damien was a shitty villain. I know I'm coming out swinging on this one, but I just don't feel like he had a compelling motivation. There's this idea that he suffered too, something he alludes to very on, but he becomes so irredeemable by the end that any suffering is retroactively justified. He also lacks a screen presence, making any calls or cutscenes with him boring in comparison to other antagonists. I found Quinn more interesting despite seeing less of him because he had a direct role in the story, and his introduction was stellar. Damien ultimately seemed like a good means of pushing the plot along, but not much else. The same can almost be said for Iraq, and the largest issue with his character is just how long we spend getting to him. I enjoyed him more than Damien because while he didn't pose a real threat to Aiden, his screen presence was off the charts. His voice actor really delivered with his performance, and made him one of the most memorable characters despite much of the gameplay surrounding him being rather dull. Then we have the less character and more entity of DedSec. DedSec is presented as a shadowy organization, not unlike Anonymous. There isn't much of a hierarchy within DedSec, but it does have leaders, or at least people who decide who gets in and who is kicked out. The most interesting part of DedSec in this game is just how different they are to future iterations. By the second game, DedSec is seen as less of an all-seeing big brother and more of a lousy group of random kids. I can still appreciate their portrayal in both Watch Dogs 2 and Legion, but now that I've seen how they work in this game, I understand the disappointment in their presentation later in the series. Ultimately, the story in this game is atmospheric and really interesting. I enjoyed seeing Aiden transform from someone on a quest for revenge to someone in it for the greater good, even if his means of doing so are questionable at times. The story's pacing was well done despite dragging in Act 3, and the only segment I would outright take out of the game was Default's minor appearance. He appears just after you steal the data from Iraq to complicate plans, and we stop him in one mission, which felt as though it was there for the sake of it. In a vacuum, it's a great mission, but its relevance to the plot felt forced, especially when we just spent 2 hours trying to download Iraq's data. Otherwise, this is the most interesting plot in any Watch Dogs game. The other games had strengths, such as the moment-to-moment dialogue, which was much better in 2, and certain moments in Legion are the best in the series, but the tone and story told here is the best we have, and it only expands in Bad Blood. Bad Blood is an expansion for Watch Dogs that supposedly takes place a year after the events of the main game, but I think that is a misconception. There's a radio segment that plays early in the DLC that discusses the events of the main campaign, namely Default's run-in with Pierce, and it is reported to have happened last month, meaning the events of the game could not have taken place a year after. Perhaps this was an oversight from the writers, but I thought I should mention it nonetheless. This expansion sees you playing as T-Bone, who is on his way out of Chicago, but before he leaves, a ghost from his past comes to haunt him, namely Default. Just before T-Steak is about to leave, he gets a call from Tobias, a side character from the main game, and asks for his help. Once helping him, T-Bone catches wind of fixers looking for both him and Tobias. After following a trail of informants, they find out that the fixers were hired by Default. Once investigating more, Ray finds that Default has a vendetta against him because his brother died during the blackout of 2003, and Default wants revenge. When attempting to track him down, Default eventually traps him in a room with all of the victims' families, and they vote on whether or not Ray should die. Despite a speech that explains his intentions and his guilt that he felt for the last decade, the people still decide that he should die. At the last second, Tobias is able to help Kenny hack into Default's hideout and reroute the poisonous gas, pumping it into his office instead of Ray's chamber. It's a short story that cleans up the loose ends left behind in Watch Dogs and allows us to play as a fan favorite. Aiden is brought up on a few occasions in this DLC, and by the end we hear that Aiden and T-Bone plan to team up to take down Bloom and continue doing their vigilante thing. At first, the DLC is rather jarring because T-Bone speaks far more than Pierce ever did and carries a more pronounced personality, but it makes the conversations between chapters more interesting and it lends itself better to the short runtime. Aiden can get away with leaving tidbits of motivations and personality around because we had an entire game to figure things out. Here it's much more straightforward, meaning if you didn't like Aiden, then there's a good chance you'll like T-Bone much more. Tobias got on my nerves more than he did for others, I imagine, but the budding friendship between him and Raymond entertained. The gameplay here is where Bad Blood is at its best, and also where the whole game is at its best. Raymond plays the same as Aiden, having the same abilities too, but instead of a baton he uses a wrench and a stun gun. His most notable change is with Eugene, his RC car that is capable of hacking things for him and even taking down the occasional guard. This car within the DLC did not get too much use, but it was interesting to see the seeds planted here that would eventually blossom into the RC car in Watch Dogs 2. Otherwise, mechanics are the same here as they were in the base game, which is no issue whatsoever. What is noticeably different is the context in which you utilize those mechanics. Mission structure is far more varied, and even when it falls back on the simple task of clearing a room, the environments offer greater challenge. When sneaking into one area, you'll have to avoid traps and other security, and when sneaking into another, you'll need to move through a mansion, allowing for claustrophobic stealth that stands out as one of my favorite moments in the game. Even the basic camera hacking is given newfound fun, as in a few instances, those cameras have guns mounted to them, which offer another means of pressuring an opponent behind cover. One of the final missions sees you defending your home base against invading fixers through their use of traps, and one's even more abundant and elaborate than that of the main game. The environments like the final push against default are memorable, and enemy layouts were difficult, leading to a DLC that seemingly never slowed down. Overall, I found Bad Blood to almost be hard to discuss. Everything here is simply done well, and there isn't much new to speak of that isn't a slight remedy to the main campaign or building off the ideas presented there. The game wraps up some loose ends regarding Kenny, and we get a good idea of what Aiden has been up to, notably being the same old shenanigans, but also baking.
Bringing the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit with a wooden spoon. Mix your butter into the mashed bananas. Use a large mixing bowl. Mix in the sugar, egg, and vanilla. Lightly sprinkle in your baking soda. Mix vigorously. Add your flour and mix. Pour your mix into a buttered loaf-shaped pan. Bake for 50 minutes. Cool for 10 minutes. Remember the most important step. Enjoy.
Yo, 15 minutes, my fucking ass. I put that shit in for 20 and it's raw as fuck in the middle. Look at that. Aiden, what are you doing? That is just battered. Like, that's not even... the fuck? I mean, the ends look good though. Look at that.
I really enjoyed Bad Blood for being more of the main game and not overstaying its welcome. It was a solid addition to the main campaign and works beautifully as an epilogue to Aiden's story. Something I came to realize about Watch Dogs is that while the game is exceptionally well made and I would recommend it to anyone, hacking plays a surprisingly small role in the game. In gameplay, the hacking was a press of a button outside of cameras. If an enemy was standing in front of an explosive, you tapped a button to take them out for free, and the same was true with driving. In the story, there were many instances where the hacking didn't affect the story. I mean, one of the more significant goals, getting Iraq's hard drive, specifically could not be done remotely, eliminating the entire fear and intrigue associated with hacking. Hacking is scary because it happens without you knowing, and anyone could be the ghost in your machine, but we don't really see that materialize. And when we do, it's fleeting. In combat, hacking plays nearly no role, and again, this isn't bad because the gunplay here is top notch, but it is also strange, and it's one of the many expectations that shattered upon release. Sure, Bad Blood remedied these issues to an extent, but it was almost too little too late. What is most interesting about Watch Dogs, especially in retrospect, is that its dystopia that it has created is not far off from our current reality, and in many ways we are past this age of insecurity. We already live in a world where there's security cameras on every corner, and while entire cities aren't controlled by one operating system, we certainly see digital blackmail used all the time. I would have liked to have seen some commentary on the ethics of surveillance within the game. For example, facial recognition software could help us catch criminals on the run or ones hiding in plain sight, but what if the computer is wrong? Furthermore, we have a new issue that even Watch Dogs couldn't predict: AI. We can blackmail someone with photos of them committing crimes, but what if those images aren't real? How would a society react if the integrity of images and audio recordings were destroyed? Many pieces of media saw these issues as being far in the future, but that's happening right now. Don't believe me? Listen to this.
I got a 12-pack of that gorilla. That shit you can only find walking along the Hajish transport paths in Azerbaijan. I'm smoking on Bhutanese garden-grown Dark Evil pack. They watered this with the blood of 36 dragons. Shit so purple it should be asking me, where's Ronald? This shit will turn your pacemaker off. Nuclear levels of sour. Lung-slaughtering necromancer kush. Shit got diamonds on it, so you know that THC to CBD ratio is fucking swag. A whiff of this shit. Yeah, that nefarious sorcerer moongrass. This shit straight out of K-Lid. This shit is what shot Tupac. Peace.
That was an AI-generated recording of me, and while it isn't perfect, it's getting close. How long before your favorite YouTuber is pushed off the platform because an AI used their voice to say heinous things? This is all food for thought that I'd like to see in hopefully another entry in the Watch Dogs series, but I'm getting a little distracted. Let's get back to the controversial game that started the series. The release of Watch Dogs was not kind, and this led to some of the game's other weaknesses being blown out of proportion. Outlets like What Culture, in a rather intelligent move, capitalized on those like many others, creating entire lists for why the game sucks, and their reason reasons, and yes, this is real, were minigames suck, you can't shoot while driving, the landmarks are different, and more. The justification makes it even further apparent that this was done to capitalize off of a hate mob. Yes, what culture, nobody would pay $60 for a game where you participate in a ball-finding minigame, but that's not the game. Yes, the landmarks are different, but calling that inconsistency, one that you know was done for copyright purposes, infuriating? Be real. An even worse reason is that NPCs curse too much, and again, this is real. Clara's design was made to show off cleavage and be edgy, making it embarrassing to play around others. Admittedly, some of the criticisms here, like the graphics downgrade and the Ubisoftification of the open world, are valid, but otherwise this is a poorly made hit piece that is far more embarrassing to publish than playing Watch Dogs ever could be. The point here is that with all this buzz led to a warped view of the game. Watch Dogs, despite its pre-release claims, did many things exceptionally well. And if you were one of the people that loved this game, then the future of Watch Dogs is as dystopian as it gets. The reception of Watch Dogs was not a kind one, and while many loved Aiden, the gameplay, the ideas, and the world, many did not. There were just as many that felt Aiden was a bland character, that the story was boring, or that the gameplay was bad. And couple this with the controversial release, and we have a game with a heavily misunderstood reputation, with too many people focused on what the game could have and potentially should have been, and not for what it is. And Ubisoft intended to correct that. In some ways this worked, and in others, it completely backfired. The story and general tone of the next entry would be a step in an entirely new direction, and while its gameplay was vastly improved, was the change worth it? I initially believed so, because I misunderstood Watch Dogs. I believed everything I read online, and I let the opinions of others cloud my perception of the game, and that's where a lot of fans might have misunderstood this game too. Now that I've replayed the game after playing Watch Dogs 2, after Legion, after enough time, I can view the game not for what it was, or what it could have been, but for what it is. And what it is great. Hello there, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, I would appreciate a like or a subscription, and if you really want to support the channel, you can do so by joining the Patreon in the description. To those of you who are already part of the Patreon, thank you so much for your support. I'll have your names on screen right now. Alternatively, you can become a channel member. A link to that will also be in the description. I had a lot of fun making this video. I think it turned out well. I enjoyed putting it together. I appreciate our editor, Sean, who put most of the video together. I just sort of come in and do the music at the end. And title cards too, but for the most part, it's all Sean's work. So thank you so much, Sean, if you're watching this. I don't know what the next video is going to be on. I've been enjoying just sort of going with the flow and jumping into whatever I feel like doing at the moment. And I just want to thank you guys for your support. You know, I recently got a very fortunate opportunity to play Jedi Survivor early. As of recording this, that was like about 2 weeks ago. And just things like that are really, really neat. And I don't say it as to like brag, but as to say like thank you for basically watching my videos enough that I'm allowed to do these really cool things. And that privilege is just incredible. So thank you. Hopefully I'll have more videos soon. I'm trying to just get them out as fast as I can, but I'm also trying to take more time to just tinker with things and try different things out. I think you guys have noticed the last, I want to say like a couple months of videos have just been all over the place in terms of just trying new things. And that's fun. I'm not good at theoretical experiments. I need to just actually try something new and then look back on it retroactively once it's done. And then I can kind of get an idea if something worked or didn't work. That's basically all I have to say. You can follow my Twitter in the description to find video updates along with anything else. I'm thinking I might start streaming again on a second channel. I've said this in like 3 different videos now that I'm thinking about it, but I am still thinking about it. It's just that I have a very hectic schedule, and so I don't know if I could find not even the time, but just the consistency to do it. So that is all I have for now. Thank you so much for your support. Much love, take care, and I'll see you next time.